In 1999, the third most used platform on the internet was a web hosting service known as GeoCities. During its lifespan, many users would use this platform to create reflections of their personalities, careers, and their passions. You could find web pages about corporate cults, haunting stories of the gates to hell in Ohio, and ghost hunters collecting evidence of the paranormal. Then in 2009, Yahoo pulled the plug, and all 38 million web pages were removed. Thankfully, some were archived, and in this series I'll be taking a look back at the ones recovered. If you are interested in checking out any of the pages I showcase today, the usernames and links will be at the top before each reading. Sit back, relax, and welcome to GeoCity Dive, Episode 3. Just a fair warning before I get too deep into these websites. This episode will have discussions that aren't for the faint of heart. Topics of suicide and murder will be brought up, but will not be the focus of this episode. If that doesn't bother you, then let's continue. WV Mountain Mama Ghost Hunters. This is a family-owned paranormal investigation team based in West Virginia. The last time this site was updated was in 2007 to 2008, I believe. The West Virginia Mountain Mama Ghost Hunters is a non-profit group located in Parkersburg, West Virginia, who seek to discover and document paranormal phenomenon and experiences. We have been investigating as a group since early 2004. We follow certain guidelines and protocols and use various scientific methods of collecting and documenting evidence, such as photos and audio and video recordings. We do not use Ouija boards or seances. We also take a scientific and common sense approach when investigating. We try to explain things first before jumping to any conclusions. However, if we can't explain it, then perhaps it's paranormal. Our main goal and mission is to offer any kind of assistance to those who are looking for help. Our services are confidential and free of charge. Important note, we do not do crossovers or exorcise spirits. If that is what you want and are in need of, we may be able to refer you to those who are experienced in those matters. We merely try to document and validate possible paranormal activity. Then we determine who is needed to contact, if additional assistance is needed for you and wanted by you. We also attempt to uncover possible alternative explanations, which may explain away certain paranormal activity. I looked at their standards and protocols for investigations, and it seems to be just common sense. No smoking, no alcohol before, during, or after investigations, no Ouija boards or seances, do not destroy property, do not take photos from moving vehicles on dusty roads. Pretty standard stuff in paranormal investigations groups. I like that this group took a more skeptical approach to their investigations. Most paranormal investigation teams will hear the building settle or see a door open by the wind and think that's a ghost. From the homepage, I found their investigations, some featuring pictures and EVPs, or electronic voice phenomenon for those who are unaware. If you still don't know what that is, EVPs are a method of communication paranormal investigators use to relay messages from spirits using digital audio recording equipment. Allegedly, not all voices from the other side can be heard normally. Digital equipment tends to pick up dialogue that we simply cannot hear, thus making it a great tool for asking spirits questions and hopefully recording an answer. The first investigation we're going to be looking at is Emmetts Tunnel. The headline in the Parkersburg News on June 7, 1963 read, B&O Tunnel Cave-In Traps 2 at Emmetts. A number of men were working on the old 1867 tunnel as part of an improvement project, but the tunnel collapsed, trapping 2 men. Rescue efforts included trying to lay steel rails in the tunnel to get necessary equipment in to help remove rubble and locate the missing men. Rescuers also brought in air compressors and water and air pumps to try to save them. One man who was buried under rock and debris was able to speak and was located. After being trapped for approximately 18 hours, he was rescued and taken to the hospital. Unfortunately, he passed on later due to his injuries. The other man was still trapped and missing under the rock and dirt of the tunnel cave-in. Sadly, the other missing man who remained trapped could not be found. Despite desperate efforts to locate him, the tunnel was so unstable and unsafe for the rescue to continue. The rescue efforts were halted and the tunnel entrance was covered in mounds of dirt. Partway through the tunnel where the cave-in occurred, it was sealed up with concrete and dirt, entombing the man who was trapped there and has been his final resting place ever since. A new tunnel was constructed almost parallel to the old 1867 tunnel, which is dated back to 1963. Today, it is part of the Rails to Trails. It's sad that there is no memorial for the man who lies in the old tunnel. One entrance to the collapsed tunnel can still be seen if you walk through the old tunnel and turn to your left and go up the hillside. It is a small hole, and inside it is muddy and wet and dangerous. The ceiling of the tunnel is crumbling apart, and there is almost about 7 to 10 feet of water a feet away from the entrance. Farther back, you can still see the wall of concrete where a man's body lies behind it under rock and debris. Here's a collection of EVPs that they heard from their first investigation there and their returning investigation on the anniversary of the tunnel's collapse.
Somebody talking.
The next investigation that we're going to look at is Logan Mental Hospital. Logan was built in 1924 in Mason, West Virginia with the aid of African-American legislators T.J. Nutter, Harry Capehart, and T.J. Coleman, who also established other facilities and were run by African-Americans during the era of segregation, hence the name the Logan Industrial School for Colored Boys. Logan was a reform school for African-American youth. Most staff and boys worked on the surrounding farm. The industrial school was in operation from 1924 until 1956. The hospital from the insane was located across the road from the industrial school. Though some pieces of the old hospital remain, the majority of it was later torn down, and the Logan nursing home now stands on that site. However, there has been much speculation as to what happened at Logan. Could it have been part of the hospital as well? For instance, on the 3rd floor, there was a large trough-like structure. Many claim that this is where they perform lobotomies and electric shock treatments. There is also a story about a nurse who was shoved from behind and fell to her death on the basement stairs. After Logan closed its doors in 1956, the property was claimed by the West Virginia Department of Health and Human Services until 1976. At that time, the West Virginia Department of Agriculture inherited it. In November 2007, the American Electric Power Company purchased the property. It was the AEP's River Operations Facility who purchased the property to expand their development. They tore down Logan, and it no longer stands. This investigation had a lot of EVPs, so here's a collection of the ones that I found to be the most clear.
I don't know if I want to
The third investigation, West Virginia State Penitentiary, Moundsville Prison. And this was a day tour investigation. The West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, often referred to as Moundsville Prison, was completed in 1876 at a cost of $363,000. It set the tone for correctional facilities throughout West Virginia and the country as well. The Wagon Gate was the first building to be constructed. It housed 150 inmates who worked to construct the state's second oldest public building. Surrounding the Wagon Gate are cell block areas. An administration building and living quarters for the warden and his family are located in the center of the structure. The facility opened for full operation in 1876 with 251 inmates. Expansion of the prison began in 1929. It wasn't completed until 1959 because of the steel shortage during World War II. The first execution at the penitentiary took place in 1899. A total of 94 men were executed at Moundsville Prison. From 1899 to 1949, 85 men were hung, and from 1951 to 1959, 9 men were electrocuted by Old Sparky. The last execution by hanging in the state of West Virginia took place in 1949. In 1951, the state began using the electric chair, until the state abolished the death penalty in 1959. In later years, the prison had many disturbances, such as riots and escapes. The prison population in the 1960s peaked with a total of 2,000 prisoners. However, new prisons were being built in other areas, and by the time the facility closed, prisoners decreased to 600 to 700. In 1986, the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled that the prison's 5x7 cells were cruel and unusual punishment. Moundsville then closed its doors in 1995. After the prison closed, the Moundsville Economic Development Council obtained a 25-year lease on the facility. The prison has been named to the National Register of Historic Places and is used for historical educational tours, as well as paranormal investigations. It is also the National Corrections and Law Enforcement Training and Technology Center. Here are some more EVPs from other investigations that they've done. These EVPs are from the Gates Ridge Cemetery in Rockport, West Virginia, and the Colony Theater in Marietta, Ohio.
Mr. Shea, look at all these beautiful women down here. Come on. How many beautiful women do you see? The answer better be more than one, son.
A healthy amount of skepticism is nice to have when looking at these websites and listening to these EVPs. And it seems like this group of paranormal investigators also had the same thought process when doing these investigations. So it's hard to argue that they have no credibility altogether. Though one of their rules says no Ouija board investigations, yet one of their investigations features a Ouija board. So who knows? Haunted Central Ohio. Supposed ghost sightings, haunted houses, eerie roads, and other sinister phenomenon exist within the borders of every state, and Ohio is no exception. The woods in most of the 88 counties seem to invoke strange and creepy happenings, ripe with rumor and gossip. These legends then develop into accepted truth, making that more difficult to separate reality from myth. This site is dedicated to investigating these claims, but we do it in the daytime. We are of the opinion that ghost hunts in the dark begin with an uneasy feeling and certain expectations. There's nothing that leads us to believe that if ghosts exist, that they should only manifest when it is after sundown, at a certain time, or only if certain words are spoken. If these beings have a will, then they should be able to appear anytime that they want. As we explore these places with a skeptical yet open mind, please remember that we try to find evidence that ghosts exists. But in order to do that, we must remove the falsehoods, the legends, and the myths. That which remains must be truth. More times than not, you may discover that there is nothing to these sightings once the ignorance is replaced with the facts. Kenyon College, located in Gambier, is literally infested with rumors of ghosts, demonic churches, and of course, the gates of hell. The gates of hell gained notoriety when a witch said on a nationally televised program that the gates of hell literally exist in no county at Kenyon College. There are several stories surrounding the gates, and some of them include: a professor killed students, locked himself in his house, and the students and faculty burnt the house down. The gates were an entrance to his house. A student or professor performed many black rituals and successfully opened up a portal to hell just before he died in an unexplained fire. The gates are all that remain of the structure that housed the portal. Before the college was founded, witches and warlocks and various practitioners of the occult opened the gates of hell because it was a secret and isolated location. They could then return anytime that they wished and conjure whatever they thought they could conjure up. The college was then founded, and every time a building was erected in the spot that contained the portal, it burned down. The gates are the only remains. There are also several ghosts that haunt Kenyon. Capel's Hall. A male student was killed either accidentally or on purpose by falling down a shaft. He torments the female students that come in. Lewis Hall. The ghost of a freshman that hanged himself flushes toilets, turns lights on and off, and knocks on doors. Manning Hall. The ghost of a student that died under unusual circumstances will sometimes rearrange furniture here. Norton Hall. The ghost of a student that committed suicide roams the halls. Wertheimer Hall. A ghost runs through this building. His footsteps can be heard clearly. There are many stories associated with Kenyon, including the fire that took 9 lives, the swimming pool, Schaefer Hall, one of the fraternities that is haunted in a building that has no windows and is always locked. I was able to find evidence of the fire that happened at the Kenyon dormitory in 1949. Even looking at the Kenyon College Alumni Bulletin, it also says that a lot of these rumors are simply hearsay. The fire did happen, but the claim that a witch went on live television and talked about the gates to hell never really happened, actually. The story I've heard falls into the undocumented "it is said" category. It is said that the writer Anthony Burgess, who spoke on campus during the late 70s, later appeared on the Phil Donahue Show and told a national audience that the Kenyon College was the home to the gates of hell and was the most intense evil energy that he has ever experienced. Hearing about this, the college requested a videotape of the show, but when it arrived, there was no mention of evil at Kenyon or any hellish gates. Some cite this excision as eerily suggestive in itself. Others scoff, raising the obvious question whether Burgess ever said such a thing at all. There are other tales. According to one, it was a psychic who identified Gambier as the home to the gates of hell. Another insists that the evil portal is actually the old gated entrance to the bishop's house and the densely wooded lower reaches of Brooklyn Street. Whatever the case, superstitions have grown up around the gates. Some say that you shouldn't walk between the gates when the bells in the Church of the Holy Spirit are chiming at midnight, or you might be transported to hell itself. Whatever the case may be with this folktale, I hope that any potential spirits that are lingering at Kenyon, and as a whole, receive the peace that they deserve. And whether or not you believe these stories to be true, the question of what happens after death has crossed our minds once or twice. Whatever happens to us tomorrow, the next month, or over the next decade, I hope that everyone who's listening receives the peace that they deserve. Thank you all for watching. I hope this episode lived up to some expectations some people had with this series. Though I'm not gonna lie, this episode was very difficult for me, so I apologize if this video lacked in content. Without being too open and personal, I'm battling with some mental health issues right now that is severely halting most of the work I put into these videos. The format I'm trying to utilize turns this channel into a show, and at first I thought it would be weekly. I simply bit off more than I can chew with this series, and I need to take a step back and look at it as a whole. I just personally feel like I should take a more casual approach to this show, and not make any new series before I even consider all of the variables. I got way too ahead of myself and ended up putting myself in a place where these mental issues I have are extremely highlighted during the creation process of the show. Again, thank you all for your incredibly kind support. With this change, hopefully you'll see a lot more consistency going forward. I sincerely appreciate you all. Have a spooky Halloween.